Dive straight in. We're looking at a really pivotal moment. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa heading to the White House this Wednesday, May 21st, for a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. And this isn't just any meeting, is it?
No, not at all. Relations have been, well, let's say strained lately.
Yeah, strained is putting it mildly. We've seen aid canceled, the South African ambassador actually expelled. There's real concern it could get worse.
Right, especially around those U.S. trade privileges.
Yeah.
That's a big deal for South Africa.
Absolutely. So our mission today, for you listening, is to really unpack the key issues here. What could happen and, why is there this tension between them?
Exactly. It's a critical moment, and understanding the drivers behind it is crucial. We want to dissect those core issues, look at the potential outcomes, and just grasp what's really at stake.
Okay, so first off, there's this kind of shadow hanging over the meeting, isn't there? People are remembering Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit back in February.
That's right. The reports were that it was a difficult meeting in the Oval Office with Trump.
Yeah, and analyst Neil Litzwala said Ramaphosa is in a tricky place to be. So is there a worry Ramaphosa might face something similar?
I think that's definitely part of the backdrop. The Zelensky meeting is, a recent reference point for potentially tough high-level talks.
Right.
Litzwala's comment really highlights the tightrope Ramaphosa has to walk. He might face difficult demands, maybe a confrontational style. Negotiation skills will be absolutely key.
And then there's this other layer. Just recently, 59 white South Africans arrived in the U.S. They've been granted refugee status.
And that's really stirred things up.
It has. You've got Trump and Elon Musk weighing in, suggesting these people face persecution back home.
Yeah. And then Secretary of State Marco Rubio made that statement.
Right. Rubio said prioritizing this group is in the U.S. national interest. He called them a small subset, easier to vet.
And explicitly said they were being persecuted for being white. He didn't rule out race as a factor.
Which is quite a statement.
It's very direct. Linking their race to refugee status like that, framing it as persecution, it directly counters the South African government's view. That's almost certainly going to be a major friction point.
And having figures like Trump and Musk amplifying it just adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It makes it an even more sensitive agenda item.
Okay, so that brings us to maybe the core issue for many, South Africa's land expropriation law.
The big one.
The Trump administration has been very critical, seeing it as targeting minority white landowners. We should probably get some context here for everyone listening.
Definitely. It's crucial. This law aims to tackle massive historical inequalities in land ownership.
Yeah, the figures are pretty stark. Black South Africans, over 80% of the population, that's like 63 million people, own only about 4% of private land.
While the minority white population holds around 72% of agricultural land. It's a huge disparity.
So the law lets the government take land for redistribution. The key phrase is, without mandatory compensation, if it's deemed just and equitable and in the public interest.
And you absolutely have to understand the history here. Apartheid. The systematic forced removal of black South Africans from their land for the benefit of whites.
Right.
This law is fundamentally an attempt to redress that deep historical injustice. But the Trump administration's focus, it's on the potential impact now on current landowners, especially white farmers.
It's interesting you mention that because while the focus is often farming land, it affects urban areas too, right? Lack of land hinders housing, keeps inequality going.
Exactly. It's broader than just agriculture. But the narrative often gets focused there.
And Trump himself, he wasn't exactly subtle. He claimed the law targets white landowners, even mentioned unverified claims of genocide and brutal killings of white farmers.
Yeah, very charged language.
Very.
And it's important, really important to note the strong rebuttal from South Africa. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu stated flatly, no evidence of a white genocide. The South African Police Service even warned against automatically linking current farm attacks to that historical context of race-based violence. So you have these two completely different frames.
One focused on fixing the past, the other on perceived present dangers. A major clash.
Precisely.
Okay, and then, as if that wasn't enough, there's South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, the genocide case.
Right, against a key U.S. ally.
Unsurprisingly, that hasn't gone down well with the Trump administration.
No, and this introduces a whole different dimension, doesn't it? A geopolitical one.
Yeah.
It shows these fundamental differences in how they see international law, the role of courts like the ICJ, and just, their place in the world. It complicates things way beyond just South Africa's domestic policies.
So let's shift gears a bit to the economics, because the stakes are really high here.
Immense.
The U.S. is South Africa's second largest trading partner, and South Africa gets huge benefits from a U.S. trade agreement, AGOA, right? Duty-free access for many goods.
That's the one, but especially for agriculture. About 2/3 of their agricultural exports come into the U.S. duty-free under that deal.
Losing that access? Wow. That would be a massive hit to their economy.
Oh, absolutely. A huge economic setback. AGOA has been a major boost, letting their industries compete in the U.S. market.
So it's not just tariffs, it's about competitiveness, growth.
Exactly. Key sectors. And the fact that some U.S. lawmakers are already talking about reviewing these privileges this year, that shows the real economic leverage the U.S. has.
And the potential cost for South Africa if this diplomatic row continues.
Precisely. The economic pressure is real.
So Ramaphosa goes into this meeting. What's his game plan? What does he want?
Well, the main goal seems pretty clear. End this feud, de-escalate, and crucially, keep that trade deal secure.
His office talked about reframing bilateral economic and commercial relations.
Right, trying to reset things. And there's that interesting angle about Elon Musk's Starlink.
Yeah, the satellite internet service, a potential licensing deal, maybe as a sort of goodwill gesture.
It could be seen that way, a strategic move perhaps. Trying to appeal to Trump's interests, maybe his connections. Ramaphosa's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, confirmed they are talking to Starlink.
So it's definitely on the table.
Seems so. Shows they're looking for ways to, find some common ground, maybe improve the overall tone.
But what are the red lines? What could blow this whole meeting up?
That's the million-dollar question.
Analyst Neo Let's suggested that if the U.S. demands Ramaphosa retract the Land Expropriation Act or drop the Gaza case at the ICJ, that would be a deal breaker.
It tests that stance Ramaphosa has taken about not being bullied by America while still trying to preserve the relationship.
Professor Andre Duvenhage called this meeting Ramaphosa's single biggest challenge as president. That says a lot.
It really does underscore the gravity. Let's point hits on core sovereignty issues. Backing down on the land law, seen as vital for historical justice, or the Gaza case, reflecting a wider foreign policy stance.
It would be politically damaging at home.
Hugely damaging, a major loss of face. Duvenhage's assessment really hammers home the immense pressure he's under, balancing these incredibly high-stakes, competing demands.
And we're seeing different takes on how it might actually go. Letswala calls it make or break, says Ramaphosa needs supreme negotiation tactics.
Yeah, emphasizing the deep disagreements, the real risk of failure.
But then you have Professor Christopher Ofokasik, who sounds a bit more optimistic.
Right. He pointed out that Ramaphosa, like Trump, is a businessman president.
Could that shared background actually help? Could it bridge some of these massive divides?
It's an interesting thought, a fascinating contrast in predictions, really. Let's sees the potential pitfalls, the deep divisions. Isaac offers that maybe a shared business mindset, a more transactional approach, might find a way through.
So it could go either way.
It really could. Success probably hinges on whether both leaders are actually willing to find some compromise, despite these really fundamental differences.
So wrapping this up, we've got a situation with major tensions. Deeply different views on the white South African refugees, the incredibly sensitive land law, South Africa's actions at the ICJ.
Fundamental disagreements.
And hanging over it all are these crucial economic ties, potentially at risk, depending on this one meeting. It's a lot to resolve in one go.
It really is. This meeting goes way beyond just diplomatic niceties. It has real, tangible consequences for both countries. The conflicting stories, the high stakes. It creates a lot of uncertainty about where this relationship is headed.
Yeah. And considering this whole complex mix, the history, the economics, international politics we've dug into here, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What are the long-term implications for the U.S.-South Africa relationship? And maybe going beyond the headlines and the official policies, how much do those individual stories, those perceptions like the refugees or the farmers, actually shape these huge international dynamics? Something definitely worth mulling over.